Welcome to Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards. Stay tuned as we explore the latest resources, thoughts, and trends in workforce development. And now, here's your host, Ron Painter.
Welcome to Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards from Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Ron Painter. Doug Foresta, as always, at the controls. Today, my guest is Bob Lanter, who is the Executive Director for the California Workforce Association. And we're going to be talking about, obviously, California and workforce development. Bob, welcome.
Thanks, Ron. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I know just before we jumped on, it's a little gray here in Washington, D.C. I'm assuming that as I reach you in California, it likewise is a gray day, right?
Well, you could only hope that it would be gray, Ron, but it is bright and sunny and 72 degrees today in California. Flip-flop and shorts weathers. Yeah.
All right. And I have my East Coast tie on today. So
isn't that so stereotypical? All of us in California, that's what we wear: flip-flops and shorts.
Bob, first of all, I want to start and talk to you. You are a Bay Area native, so you're a native to California.
Yes, sir. Born and raised in the Bay Area, in the East Bay.
You're California by itself. I come out there. You're gracious enough to help me navigate California as I come out each December. It's huge. It's big because I start in the south, but I fly. I do a couple of flights to get up to Sacramento.
Right.
7th, 8th largest economy in the world by itself.
Right.
How do you approach thinking about California? Tell me a little bit about the California Workforce Association, and tell me a little bit about how as the director you piece together California.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it is a big state, and with that comes a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenge, as you would imagine. California Workforce Association, we have as the core of our membership the workforce development boards, the local workforce boards in California, of which there are 48 boards, and that's a huge number. I mean, that dwarfs many states in our country, and we have about 600 individual local workforce board members who serve on boards. They all belong to the association. And then the association has probably a whole host, maybe about 75 now, other organizations who support our mission, which is advancing local workforce development in the regions throughout California. Really looking to see, these regional economies thrive by building a quality talent pipeline. So how do we piece it together? Well, there's a couple things. One is, WIOA really kind of sets out this regional framework. And I think in California, we've been thinking of our state that way for a long, long time. We think of it as regions, and whether that's, Northern California, Central California, Southern California, or whether that is in some of the sub-regional work. If you take a look at, for example, the Bay Area, you've got the East Bay, the South Bay, the North Bay. That's true as well in Southern California with Southeast Los Angeles and the Inland Empire and the West, the Central Coast. So we break our state into regions, and we've done that for a long, long time. And that really does help us because it enables us to focus investments strategically. And then when we need to come together as Californians on an issue, and, for example, a national issue, we come together very well because at the end of the day, we are all Californians and we're able to band together, and we know we're the 7th or 8th largest economy in the world, and we have some of the world's largest industries here in our state. And so we work through that. And as I said, the challenges are there. And you mentioned one of them, travel, of course, north to south, you need the better part of 24 hours to do that. However, there are other challenges that come with being so large. We have a state that has a wide skills gap. We have, which contributes to income inequality in our state. We, in some of our biggest cities in the world, we have those that are doing very well and contributing to the local economy, and we have those that are struggling to get by. We have 16% of our population lives at or below the poverty level, which is the largest in the country. So, with the enormous size comes enormous challenges and enormous opportunities.
I'm going to stay away from asking you to talk about the skills perspective, your skills perspective of, say, the Dodgers and the Giants and Angels and the Padres.
Yeah, speaking of North and South.
But so part of that answer, Bob, has been California as a state has committed some serious money to this notion of skilling the population.
Right.
You have a couple of initiatives. Can you tell me a little bit about what the state has put on the table out of State General Revenue Fund and then
we have certainly. I mean, so a couple of things have happened over the course of the last decade or so. I think our Governor Brown, has realized that we have this income inequality issue, as many states in our nation do. And he also realized that if the budget is structured correctly, we could invest some, as you said, serious investment in making a dent at this. And so initially, the legislature in California started out by, deepening their investment in career tech education and the community college system. The chancellor's office at our community college system developed this Office of Workforce and Economic Development, and they funded that pretty deeply. And one of the things that they've been able to do is organize, again, regionally, because that's the way you chunk up a state this size. And so they've organized their community college campuses in regions, and then those regions have hired and assigned industry sector navigators. The initiative is affectionately called Doing What Matters for Jobs in the Economy. And so these industry sector navigators are pairing up with local workforce development boards, economic development and industry, to really ensure that the community colleges' career tech education programs are relevant, are up to date, are producing graduates that industry needs. And so that funding occurred. Just recently this year in the budget cycle, another $200 million investment in career tech education is going out to the community colleges. And this time it's really focused on curriculum portability. So if you've got a process technology training course in the Bay Area, and down in Bakersfield, where they have a lot of oil fields, they need process technology training because there's a shortage there. The curriculum can easily be transferred from schools in the Bay Area down to schools in the Bakersfield area. And right now that's a barrier for us, the portability of curriculum. So the investments are there on the community college side. And then the legislature did this really incredible, and this is my own words, incredible thinking around the pipeline, the career pathway, and how do we get young people in high schools to be thinking about careers in the 8th, 9th, 10th grades. And back, in the 70s and the 80s, our high schools were filled with vocational training, metal shop, wood shop, etc. Those all went away over the course of the years as our high schools focused on Common Core and high school exit exams. But those are coming back in a big way. And in California, the state legislature set aside $250 million investment, so $500 million over the last 2 years in what they're calling Career Pathways Trust. And that money is a competitive grant, could be upwards of $15 million in a region. Again, K-12 districts working regionally to identify career pathways in key industry sectors, and then exposing youth in high schools to those industry sectors through tours at businesses locations, through teacher shadow days where teachers go out into industry and shadow industry so that they can bring that knowledge back, to internships over the summer. And all of that is occurring now. Now, let me just kind of flip forward just one little bit. The key, really, and the trick is how you get those silos, the community colleges and career tech ed, the K-12 system, the adult education system, the workforce development system, the economic development system. How do you get those to bust their silos and begin to work together and connect those investments with one another? And that's what we're working on now.
You have an initiative in workforce that you're calling Slingshot. Can you tell me a little bit about what the Slingshot is and how does that fit in? How do the boards fit into these really truly huge investments in the state?
Thank you. I left that one out because I knew we'd be talking about Slingshot and, where's the investment in workforce development if we've got these other investments in education. And that Slingshot name, people laugh at that name. The idea is really how do you take what works in your regions and slingshot it with some investment forward, kind of hyperdrive. And that's where the Slingshot name was born. It's, using investments to slingshot good work. So let's get that out of the way and why that name. So the idea really was, hey, we all work together regionally, and workforce development boards have been working regionally for quite a long time in California. And as I just mentioned, the trick is how do we bust the silos with these big investments so that they're all linked together and we're reducing duplication and we're playing to each other's strengths. And so, as I mentioned, the governor is really interested in income inequality in our state and income mobility. He's got a jobs czar, if you will, who's also the chair of the state workforce board, who believes that in many, many families in our state and in our country, the income level that you were born in dictates the income level where you're going to stay. He does not believe that should be the case, that we should break that chain. And it happened for him, and he wants to see it happen for everybody. So what they did was they said to workforce boards in these regions, and there are 14 regional workforce areas in California under the INO, and he said, look, let's give those workforce boards an investment. You guys get together and you determine what are the barriers that are keeping your economy from reaching the next level. What are the barriers that are contributing to income inequality in your region? Tell us what that is and come up with a solution. Tell the state workforce board what your solution is and how you're going to track your progress. And if the state workforce board and the labor agency like what you have to say, we'll invest in that. We'll invest $1 million in that solution. And locally, you'll need to match it so that you can have upwards of $2 million in your region being brought to bear on this solution. So the Slingshot initiative was born, and there was not a lot of rules, which was a very interesting exercise of how people can work together. And frankly, $1 million in some of our regions isn't a lot of money. So, how do you work together to solve a big problem with some investment? So, they funded the first round were 5 regions who came in with some pretty incredible ideas. Here in the capital region, which is the region from Sacramento up into the Sierra foothills and Lake Tahoe and some of the agricultural areas around UC Davis, they are developing the ecosystem of entrepreneurship. So how do they take small and medium-sized businesses in key industry sectors that they've identified and support those industries to build them up? And not only with talented workforce, but with site location, with access to capital. So the partners in these Slingshot initiatives aren't just workforce boards. In fact, they can't be. So they're workforce, economic development, their education, and industry. the key to these plans that were submitted to the state, you had to have industry champions sign off on an industry compact that says, I've met with the regional workforce stakeholders. I am committed to being a leader in this. My business is committed, and I will invest my time, my resources in improving this industry. So most of the projects are industry sector based. There are now 13 projects that have been funded, and the way you get your money is very strategic. So you submit an action plan. Initially, you get $20,000 of planning money. That planning money goes to developing your industry compact. You turn in your industry compact. You get the balance of your money. So they give you a little planning money up front, and then you get the balance of your money. And the performance is really based on what you regionally decide should be your benchmarks with your partners. And it's really helped create this breaking down of the silos.
Let me step out half a second and remind folks you're listening to Workforce Central, the official podcast of the National Association of Workforce Boards from Washington, D.C. I'm your host, Ron Painter. My guest today is Bob Lanter, who is the Executive Director for the California Workforce Association. We've been talking about the remarkable investments, remarkable, Bob, you mentioned you had a term you threw in there called, I will call the investments in California remarkable. Let me ask you, some of these partnerships, as you mentioned, have been rolled out. I know some of them are in progress, but if I'm sitting in an area that isn't going to have $500 million of state money invested, what are some of the lessons that you all are learning as workforce boards in California? What are you learning about how to, knock down the silo, or at least have discussions across the silos?
A couple of, I think, very key lessons we're learning. They haven't been completely ingrained in our psyche yet, but we are learning them now as we speak. And one of them is the role of a board, right? The state plan and these slingshot regions put workforce boards at the epicenter of collaboration, convening, and brokering. They give them the responsibility to be the connection to industry. And boards are learning that they are this unbiased broker of solutions for workforce development. And what I mean by that is they're not necessarily looking to build up their own programs. They are working to figure out what are the key industries and that drive our regional economies, and then how do we develop solutions for those industry sectors, and then link together investments that are in our regional economy that we may not have direct authority over, but as a workforce board, the place where silos come together, the place where silos get broken down, we have the ability to influence people working together for the good of our regional and state economy. So we're learning that. And some boards have gotten it quicker than others, and other boards are trying to figure out, well, how do I fund that activity? Do I have the capacity in my staff to facilitate those kind of meetings, to bring together plans to the community, both locally and regionally, and then influence partnership building? So we're learning that. And the other second thing I would say is, in terms of business engagement, boards are learning that business engagement is critical to our industry, and that our industry wants a much more streamlined connection to their labor force. So right now we've got a whole host of stakeholders who outreach to business, and it's written into their either federal or state or local guidance. So, for example, the Department of Rehabilitation has a requirement to reach out to business. Adult education, and family literacy has to connect to industry sectors. The CTE, of course, has to be built, with industry as the driver. The INO puts industry at the heart of this. So how do you get those concentric circles to come together in a single point of contact? And I know that term has been, used a lot in our industry, the single point of contact. But what we're working towards in California is, 14 regional contacts for business and industry. So that if you're an industry, and remember, some of our regions are quite large. So if you're a manufacturing business, for example, that has 3 plants in the Inland Empire, you only need to go to one contact to access the labor pipeline to feed all 3 of those plants. And that would be the holy grail, regional business engagement.
Yeah.
Right?
Bob, are you finding, are the boards finding that their board members, I don't know, it's a qualitative term to say more engaged, but do you find the board saying to you, hey, these are the kind of conversations that we think are important for our time?
I do, and I hesitate just slightly because I think that is coming online initially at a very slow pace, but it's starting to pick up steam. So the kind of conversations that we're hearing are, hey, we've got these great pipeline plans in place, these industry sector approaches, but we have a whole segment of our population that's not ready to participate in private post-secondary education. So we need a strategy to have folks, build those on-ramps to those pathways through remedial education. So those are the kind of big discussions the boards are coming to me with. Or we need to upskill my own staff so that they can facilitate conversations and be community and civic leaders. I may need to have a whole new type of staff person than I've ever had before. And I've had people come to me, workforce board members who have been in the industry for a long, long time, say, you know what, this is changing the way we have done industry sector work and really building a new model that links all these key stakeholders to helping businesses grow. So those are phenomenal conversations that really I have seen the boards be excited to grapple with. Now, let me just say, it's not all milk and honey. I mean, some of the board members, some of the boards are still kind of struggling to how they bring those conversations right to their board meetings, but I think they're going to learn it. And that's one of the key roles of our association, is to really push them and support them and pull them and, say, you can do this. And it's critical for us to do this now more than ever.
Bob, that's really exciting to hear because, we have been talking to people, NAWB, saying, look, this is a piece of legislation, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, that really does suggest to the boards that if workforce development is a system, there has to be a place for that conversation of the system. And we think workforce boards are a great place for that to happen. So it's really encouraging to hear you say that organically is kind of rising to the fore. Bob, I really appreciate you taking some time. I want to give you an opportunity for some closing thought or two, and again, appreciate you joining me.
Well, thanks a lot, Ron. I've really enjoyed it, and happy to help support the National Association of Workforce Boards in any way we can. And I would just leave you with this thought. One of the things I think people need to really understand when they think of the workforce development system in our country is how connected it is. To the people who don't have employment and are unable to participate in the local, regional, state, national economy, all the way up to the White House and the folks in Congress. It is all very connected. And I think it's incumbent upon our system, the workforce development system, particularly the local workforce development boards, to understand that their role is really to figure out how to connect the dialogue in their local and regional economies, so that when you do your work in Washington, Ron, the people that you're meeting with there at Capitol Hill, in the White House, and the administration, they understand that our local workforce boards are the place where those conversations are not only occurring, but they're occurring and they're resulting in fantastic outcomes for our system.
Thanks, Bob. Bob Lanter, Executive Director of the California Workforce Association, has been my guest today. For the National Association of Workforce Boards, I'm Ron Painter. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to you joining us again.